Hey, I'm Zelosage Plays, and as you've probably seen in the thumbnail, today we're going to be building something very cool, an Amazonian adventure for the guests. We've built stuff in Africa, Asia, and Madagascar, and now it's time for South America. What we're building today is a sizable indoor South American themed land that will take guests from the rainforests of the Amazon up to the cloud forests of the Andes. And today specifically we're going to be building the first half of it, which is an Amazon adventure for the guests, featuring capybara and capuchin, where the guests will actually be able to walk over logs floating in the water in the habitat. We're going to be taking advantage of the interactive experience habitats that were added in the Barnyard Animal Pack, because they are not only for domestic animals, there's a few of the wild animals in the game that you can use them with, and that includes the capybara and the capuchin. We'll discuss the inspiration for this in a minute, but firstly, you can see the layout here. What we need to do first is build the big half dome that is going to cover this and keep it nice and tropical on the inside. The habitat isn't going to be contained within an actual dome, it's just going to have a curved roof over it. So the way we need to build that is a little similar to how you build a dome though. What we're going to do is build vertically upwards with these glass panels. I've measured how long the habitat needs to be, and once we get to the top we can repeat this pattern along the floor, because this is all going to be spun round into the right position eventually. But the circle trick that we're going to be using only works in one axis, so we need to build it this way to get it to work in the end. So once we've got all of these pieces going along the floor here, I'm using these triangular glass panels. They look really nice and they're often used for roofs like this. Then we're going to copy the pieces that we've just placed along the ground up to the top, and then we're going to select all of it, duplicate it and drop it on top of our mud pillar, and then we can start spinning it into position. So we've got everything selected now, and we're going to spin these round until the glass panels line up nicely with each other like that. There's a little effect where they're slightly raised, which I didn't actually intend originally, but I'm really happy with how that looks. So we're going to keep that, and we'll just keep spinning until we've almost met up with the other side. And then we'll simply select half of it and delete it, because we only need half of it. So once we've got rid of this bit here, then we can select what we've got left and spin it around the other way. And there we go, a beautiful curved roof, which is going to cover the whole habitat. We'll be putting some walls in as well, but for the moment we're just going to have the roof here so we can see how much room we've got. There will be an area of the building which isn't covered by that roof. I'll have a separate roof on it at the start, which is where the guests will enter. So we'll space that out so we know where it's going to go, and then we can start putting the paths in. So we're going to have some winding paths around here. This is where the Amazon adventure is going to go. And we want this whole thing to be sloping up towards the Andes part of the habitat at the end. So we'll use the transport ride to create a nice smooth gradient here. So we start it off about 2 degrees, then go up to about 4 degrees, and just have that climb up to the back of the building here, and then we can flatten it out. Once we've got that in, then we can just use the flatten to surface tool to effectively copy that gradient all the way across where we're going to be building, and then we can use the other tools to start getting it how we want. So animal wise, we're going to start off with the capybara and capuchin, and then go up to a habitat for the jaguar, and then we're going to end right at the top with a habitat for the spectacled bear, which I'm really excited about. I have never even seen the spectacled bear in this game, let alone built for it, so that's going to be really cool. But the bear and the jaguar will be coming next week. Once that's done, we can start getting some water in so that we can get the logs that the guests are going to use to cross here. We'll dig the water out using the terrain stamp first of all to get a basic shape in, and then we'll tidy that up and get it to the exact shape that we want. We don't want it to be too deep, we don't want anyone drowning, so once we've got the water in, we'll use our little capybara model to make sure that they'll be visible as well, and then we'll get the first guest gate in. Once we designate this as an interactive experience, then the guests won't need to walk on the paths, they can walk anywhere. We're going to make sure that the most direct route to get from the entrance where that guest gate is up to the next part of the habitat is straight across the water, which would encourage the guests to use the logs and make the habitat look really cool. Alright, with the addition of a keeper gate, we now have a functioning habitat. We're going to have another guest gate on the top left as well to get up to the spectacled bear, and now we can start decorating and making this habitat look good before we move on to making it into an interactive habitat. We're going to use the smallest faux rock to make a sort of pebble effect on the sides of the water, and we're going to do that underwater as well. And then we'll get on to the most exciting part, the log bridge. I did extensive testing on another map to make sure that this would work, but these logs here and the giant planet zoo log as well, if you sink them into the water and you get them into exactly the right position, then the guests will be able to walk over them despite the fact that they're only a few inches above the surface of the water, which is pretty cool. The animals can as well. So having built a very rough version of it just on a random map, I'm now going to recreate it here. We'll mainly use the planet zoo logs because they've got a nice flat or fairly flat surface on them, and then some of the more exciting looking logs as well. And I decided to put a little island in so we can have a log going over there as well. This is such an amazing feature. When it was added in the Barnyard Animal Pack, I was just thinking about guests being able to pet the goats or crouch down next to the chickens or whatever, but I hadn't really realised the scope that it gave us to build more interactive exhibits. Couldn't really think of a use for it until I saw the concept art that inspired this. And speaking of the inspiration, it's inspired by some concept art I just saw a few days ago for the new Rainforest Wild Zoo at the Mandar Wildlife Reserve in Singapore. They are always at the absolute forefront of zoo design, and I saw a concept art of guests walking over these logs in the middle of a jungle river. I'm basically going to recreate the concept photo that I saw here, and trust me, when it's finished, this might be the coolest thing we've ever built. Getting it to work requires an animal encounter, so you can see we've got guest gates and no dangerous animals, but we need a hygiene station and some interactive animals. So I'm just dropping a hygiene station in there just to test it, and then we can keep playing around with the logs until the traversable area shows us that the guests will be able to get over it. There we go. And we'll put some proper hygiene stations in a bit later on in the build. But now we know that the logs are going to work, we can get back to our decorating. We're going to extend the pebble motif under the water as well. It's really easy to forget to decorate underwater, but despite the fact that you can't see it very clearly, it is still important. So we're going to have a whole load of these all around here. And once we've got that filled in nicely, we'll move on to the planting. So going to be using a lot of these bushes in this build. They're so good for this kind of tropical stuff. And I want to get some flowers in as well. So rarely use flowers on this channel. We've got some nice orchids here that I'm going to put in there. This little bit here where you can see the logs and the plants, this is basically a direct recreation of the concept art that I was looking at, trying to get really close to it. And then we'll start filling in the rest of it as well with Cecropia trees and Swiss cheese plants and all stuff like that. Get some bracken in there as well to start to make this look really beautiful. It needs to be really lush and really dense in here. Don't want you to be able to see sort of the edge of the building at any point. Later on, we're going to cover all of that up. It should just be jungle and then the curved ceiling, and that's all that you can see. All right, that's a nice start. Let's get some more work done on the water. So we're going to choose the transparency and the color and get a much more Amazonian feel on it here. Don't want to go too sort of brown and murky like the Amazon is. Just suggest it with a bit more of a greenish tinge. I want a centerpiece for the habitat as well. So we're going to use one of these Wimber trees, which got a really nice tropical look to them. And there's one that usefully fills right the way up to the ceiling without going through the top of it. And we're going to dress that up with loads of roots and vines and stuff later on. We'll place a few more statement trees as well. I love the Cecropia trees. They are so South American, and that bizarre sort of super thin trunk, and then the leaves at the top almost looking like roots. They're so good and so evocative. We definitely want some of those in. And then we can move on to the walls. This is one of the sections of rock walls that we built for the Africa area. We're going to customize this and get it a bit more Amazonian in feel. We're going to change a few of the colors just to mix it up a bit and make it a bit more interesting, and then start covering it in vines and tropical plants. So we'll get some of the ponytail palms in there. We'll get some of the big strangler fig roots, a few other bits and pieces just to start bringing it into a more tropical kind of vibe. We'll get some other types of vines on here as well and just start running those down the front of it, get it looking nice and natural. And then once we've got one piece that we're happy with, we can move it inside the South American area and start using it to plot the layout of the area. This is where the jaguar habitat's going to go. So we'll lay out this little bit of wall using the piece that we created. So once we've got one in the right place, we can just start copying it across. It looks really natural if you vary exactly where it joins up with the piece before it. It's looking a little tight in there in terms of where the guest gate is, so we're going to move it back. Make sure that there's a decent amount of space for the guests to walk in. The jaguar and bear habitats are going to extend back past the end of where you can see the roof here, because they're going to have some covered parts of the habitat as well, so they're going to be bigger than they appear as you look at it here. And then we're going to take the wall down the other side and into the Amazonian adventure as well. It looks really nice hidden away behind the plants there, just stops the views out into the rest of the zoo and increases the immersion of the whole habitat. and then we'll go up to where the bear is going to be and start putting them in there. A lot of these are going to be replaced with some more mountainous looking rocks next week when we build that habitat, but there's going to be a bit of a join where it connects to the jaguar habitat, so we want a mix of walls there. And then finally we'll use it to cover up the staff buildings that we added in earlier. They are 4 meters high, so we need some high walls to block those out so the guests can't see those and it doesn't ruin the view. And then we'll move on to some fencing. We're using the basic wooden fence that we've used in a few places in the zoo, but we need to customize this one so it goes up this hill. You can't just rotate it because then the posts that hold it up will rotate as well, which is weird. You never really see that. They're always vertical. So we just need to rotate the top bits and then move the posts up to meet it. And we'll keep changing the angle of the railings so that they match this path as it winds up here. And once we finish getting all the stuff in for the guests, we can start getting some stuff in for the animals. The first thing we're going to do is create a raised feeder for the capuchin. So we're going to put this forage box in, and then we're going to surround it with some of the mud walls that we just made, and we'll make some adjustments to them so they fit nicely around the enrichment item and just work like a platform that it's sat on. Move a few of the plants around as well, just make sure everything looks nice and unique. Normally we sink these into the ground, but with it being for capuchins this time, I thought it would be fun to actually raise it off the ground, and that'll ensure that they spend as little time on the floor as possible. We're going to get a whole load of climbing in for them in a minute as well, and then we'll start doing some terrain work. So what we need to do is get the terrain to meet the feeder so that the keepers can actually get up here and get onto it. So we'll adjust the terrain upwards, leading from the path and from the little hill behind it, so everything's nice and flat. And we make sure the keepers can get over here and actually fill it up. Doesn't matter if they can get to the toy enrichments or not, but they do need to be able to get to the feeder enrichments or they won't be able to fill them. We need to delete this little bit of fence as well, just so the keepers can get in there. They just climb over it IRL, but they can't do that in Planet Zoo, so we need to make a little hole for them. And finally we'll just drop a couple more bits of wall to finish surrounding this off, and a couple of the faux rock step pieces to join the edge of the enrichment item onto the floor more naturally. Just need to quickly recolor it. There we go. One more of these and that's the enrichment item complete, and we can move on to some more detailing. So this is where the habitat gate is, hidden away behind this rock, and I'm going to turn the rock into a door. So I've sunk one of the doors in there so we can get the handle, and then we can use our new favourite piece, the string, to create a sort of crack where the door would be. So the rock's are really irregular shape, but obviously the door would be square or rectangular, I guess. So what we're going to do is create a rectangle using the string pieces. So we'll get it as far left as it can go and then go straight up from there to the top, and then we'll do the same on the right hand side as well. So we end up with a rectangle, and then we can just recolor that to a sort of dark grey, and that will give the impression, with it being so thin, that there is a door there. There we go. Speaking of doors, we need to sort out these enormous guest gates as well. I've never been a fan of these. They are so enormous and so hard to detail. Yeah, it was great that they gave us a smaller guest gate in the Barnyard Animal Pack, but that is quite literally a farm gate. So it doesn't really help us here. So what we're going to do is cover most of the wood up with some more of these faux rocks so it sits in really nicely with all the rock walls that we've got. We'll leave the actual door uncovered, obviously, because it's animated, so that's going to look really weird if we cover that up with anything. And I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with it once it's finished. The wood kind of suits the tropical theme, so we'll chuck a few more roots and things like that on it just to really meld that in to the walls on either side of it. One of the best things about tropical builds is being able to put the strangler fig roots absolutely everywhere. They're one of my favourite pieces in the game. And then we can move on to the final stage of the build, which is getting the climbing in for the capuchins. We're going to have a mix of climbing elements in here, some of these natural vines, and then some man-made climbing structures for them as well. So we're going to join all the climbable trees in the habitat together with vines, and with this man-made, more sturdy kind of vine that is made out of the bamboo pieces. We're going to build it in 1 meter sections and then just spin it into place so it looks nice and natural, like it's dangling down. And once it meets up with this other tree here, we'll recolor it. I think a woody kind of brown is going to be a lot more effective. And that is the habitat done. I am looking forward to seeing the guests in here. Let's check it out. Here's our capybara coming into the water to use their hot pipes. And the capuchins using our brand new climbing. Let's see if the guests can get across those logs. That is one of the most pleasing sights that I've seen since I started playing this game. I never thought we'd be able to do stuff like this in Planet Zoo. It's amazing that after all this time we've still got new things to do and new habitats to build. Let's take a look at the whole habitat. You can see some guests getting on over to the little island there. They will occasionally pet the capybara or capuchin, which is not something I would allow if this was a real zoo, but that is the price we have to pay for them to be able to walk all over the habitat. I really hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and next week we will be building the jaguar and spectacled bear habitats to complete from Amazon to Andes. Thanks to all of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here. Thanks for watching. Bye.